Hi everyone, my name is Natalie Jones, and I am a hydrology technician with NAU, but I've been working very closely with physical science for the past year and a half. And I work mostly with hydrology at Grand Canyon, and today I'm going to talk to you about the work we do with KARST hydrology, give you some fun facts and some updates on some of our more exciting projects, specifically the dye trace project. Awesome. So mostly today, I'm going to be covering topics that answer these three questions. So I'm going to be looking at what is KARST and where is it? Why do we care about KARST in Grand Canyon? And what KARST research are we doing at Grand Canyon? And what are we learning? So the dye trace project. So as an overview, so karst environments need two main components. They need a type of rock that can be dissolved by water. And here at Grand Canyon, that mostly comes in the form of limestone and water. And in most karst environments, it is limestone that is being dissolved. And this limestone can be dissolved with regular rainwater. And what happens is you end up getting these points of infiltration that come in and dissolve faults and fractures into caves and conduits that are then discharged as springs. And here in Grand Canyon, we actually have many caves. I believe for most of you, you might be familiar with Cave of the Domes. That is the one cave open to the public at the park. But we actually have over 400 caves in Grand Canyon that have been identified. And some of them are very large. Others, if I can get there, are quite small. Some are dry, and some are wet. And some have really spectacular mineralogical resources. And these caves are also really important for other resources within the park. There are lots of cultural resources found in caves. Caves are really important habitats for many species of animals, especially bats here in the park. And they also have lots of paleontological resources found inside of them. So here's some fun facts about caves in the park. Like I said, there's over 400 known caves, but only 15% of possible area has actually been surveyed. There's over 1 million acres of karst terrain in the area that could potentially form caves. And there have been 85 plus miles of caves that have been mapped within the park. So those are like detailed cave maps created. We actually have one of the longest caves in the country. Double Bopper, I believe, is the 8th longest in the country. It has 34 miles of mapped cave. And of national parks, there are only 4 national parks that have more caves than we do. And those are the ones with cave in their name. Believe it or not. So if I take you back to this karst diagram again, if you look, there are these infiltration points that are really important for forming these caves and connecting water to this conduit system. And here in Grand Canyon and in most karst environments, those come in the form of sinkholes, which are depressions on the land surface that form when a cave or cavern collapses and forms this depression that's visible on the surface, then creating an area that connects to this conduit system beneath the ground. So here at Grand Canyon, we can find sinkholes in lots of places. There are actually many on the south rim here, and in the surrounding lowlands there are some. But the area that we find the most is also the area with the most precipitation, which is the Kaibab Plateau. So on the Kaibab Plateau, there are lots of sinkholes of different shapes and sizes. These are images of our team going and surveying some of them. This bottom image is on the Forest Service land. This tiny little circle in there is a bonfire pit. You could fit a football field in this sinkhole. So they come in lots of shapes and sizes, and if you're looking for them, you'll see them everywhere on the North Rim. One in particular that might be easy for you to spot, this is the sinkhole right outside of the North Rim fees station. right as you're entering the park. As you're facing the park, it'll be right on your right before the feed station. And so this is a picture during spring snowmelt that shows you that 7 days later, this entire sinkhole was drained of its water. So these are pretty productive systems that can really push a lot of water into the groundwater system, which are later discharged as springs within the park. So at Grand Canyon, our specific karst scheme, you start with the sinkholes on the Kaibab Plateau. This water then comes through that conduit system, and we believe it travels through the impermeable layers, through faults and fractures, and then it'll come into this red wall Muav aquifer, which it's then discharged as springs. And one of the most famous springs that you all have probably seen is Roaring Springs. And you can see Roaring Springs here comes out right at the base of the Muav limestone with the tall red wall on top of it. So why is this important? Why do we care about karst at Grand Canyon? Well, right now, Roaring Springs is the sole water source for the entire park. So all of the water coming out of the faucets in the bathroom, here at the south rim, up at the north rim, down in the corridor, all that water comes from Roaring Springs. It's been proposed to move this water source, and I believe it's happening soon. But even the new proposed site is highly influenced from these karst springs. So Bright Angel Creek is the new proposed water source. Bright Angel Creek's fed by 3 large springs, including Roaring Springs. And even if you're traveling in the backcountry, all of the perennial springs within Grand Canyon National Park have a karst spring that is feeding their main water source. So this affects you no matter where you are in the park. And so our big questions and the things we're trying to protect are, we're trying to protect these water sources from potential contamination. Karst systems can be really fast. Actually are fast. If there's a monsoon on the Kaibab Plateau, we see a response in Roaring Springs, a peak response within 3 days. So it's basically like pipes, like funneling the water through the system to be discharged out of the spring. Another thing is the snowpack is the main water source for most of these springs on the Kaibab Plateau. And if years like this year continue, you can imagine that base flow is going to decrease over time to where it might not even be feasible for us to be using that water source anymore. So those are the concerns that we're trying to protect. So what's our best way to research this? Well, a tracer study. And our study that we have done is the DyeTrace project. And this project's been going on since 2015. In 2015, they tried to use, they kind of missed the snowmelt. I was not here in 2015. Oh, 5 minutes, thank you. So they tried to inject this, it's a non-toxic fluorescent dye, and we inject it directly into sinkholes and then monitor different creeks and springs around the canyon to see if we get positive hits in these creeks and springs. And by the time it's discharged in these creeks and springs, you can't see the dye. It's at like a trace molecular amounts. So we're actually using little packets of carbon that will adsorb and detect these molecules, and then we send them to a lab, and they will fluoresce at a certain wavelength, be able to tell us what color it is and where it came from. So in 2015, they tried to use a fire truck to flush it through. We got no results. We had to go to snowmelt. So this is actually that same sinkhole near the visitor center here. So you can kind of see a little, it's pretty big. It's a big sinkhole. So anyways, that is our method on the ground. And this was our map scheme for how we designed the project. So these shaded boxes, colored boxes, are from a paper that Peter Huntoon wrote in 1974. These are supposed to be groundwater basins telling us where the water is supposed to be going. So we designed the project to try to see these little blue triangles. Those are the locations of all of our dye receptors. So we're trying to see if these shaded boxes really do lead to where they're supposed to. It's a really strenuous project just because of the location, trying to get everything get all the dye receptors recovered. And we had a lot of staff helping out with it. My supervisor, the mastermind for the whole project, Benjamin Tobin, could not be here today, but we have him to thank for it. So these are the results in 2000. So these are the most updated results. So we had some hits down here in Bright Angel Creek. I'll draw your attention to these red triangles over here that came from this sinkhole. If you also look, we have a blue triangle. We finally got a hit at Roaring Springs, yay. That same dye was seen in Nankoweap Creek and over here at Fence Fault. And this special pink triangle, that is Vasey's Paradise. Vasey's Paradise got a positive hit for every single dye we injected on 2016 and 2017 year. Yeah, so all of these red triangles were also seen at Vasey's Paradise. So if you look back at our schematic, just really doesn't match at all. So we had to kind of come up with a different idea of what was happening here. I actually did some work looking at sinkhole mapping, and we found that sinkhole densities were more, there were higher densities of sinkholes along these known faults and fractures. And so we hypothesized that these faults and fractures are maybe actually a travel source for these dyes within the conduit system. So then, if we're looking at, here we have the Eocene dye, this red sinkhole. If we're following the faults and fractures, okay, it's beginning to make sense. It comes down here, sure, goes all the way to Vasey's. Follows the monocline, there's probably a large fault. Okay, feasible. Looking at the next one, we have this dye, the uranine injection from 2017, showed up at Roaring Springs, over in Nankoweap Creek, and then over at Vasey's Paradise. Okay, there's lots of faults and fractures, sure. But then we have here the uranine from 2016 was from this sinkhole, came down to all of the western tributaries of Bright Angel Creek, and then over to Vasey's Paradise, of course. I would just like to highlight this, however. So this is two sinkholes located on the same fault, and their paths actually cross. So we don't actually, so far the dye trace project has shown us Grand Canyon is incredibly unpredictable, and this KARST conduit system is very complicated. So these are some quick facts about the injection. It happened over 3 years. We only had 2 years of positive hits. It's actually the largest, I think it's the deepest dye trace ever done in the country, maybe the world. I should check on that. But it's a really spectacular project, and I'm really excited to be a part of it. And the overall takeaways from this presentation I would like you to take home with you is Grand Canyon is a cave park. There's a lot of caves out there, and people don't really notice them. And it's really important that we protect this water source because it affects all of you. And the KARST aquifer system at Grand Canyon is one of the most complex aquifer systems ever studied. And this is a picture of me with 2 working legs. So thank you to everyone that helped, especially to my funding peoples and all the other interns and my supervisor. And I don't know if we have time for questions. A couple of minutes for questions. All right. Yes. So base flow is between 5 and 8 cubic feet per second. But last year's snowmelt, we saw upwards of 30 cubic feet per second. Yeah, so it really varies depending on whether it's snowmelt or base flow. It is. We haven't seen any peaks so far. We went in January, and oh no, was it February? I don't know. Usually we see somewhat of a response by now, but no, it's definitely still receding from base flow. So, yes. Well, so this season we actually put the dye trace on pause, which it seems like that was a good decision based on the current snowmelt. I'm not even sure if it would have been able to push it through the system. I have not been updated on if there will be continuing plans very soon, so I can't fully answer that question. Yes? So it would be, the proposed place would be wells in the gravels beside Bright Angel Creek, down near the delta, so where Phantom Ranch actually is. And they're doing some modeling to make sure that it wouldn't be sucking in Colorado River water, and so it's being investigated. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So there's actually been a lot of work done looking at the recession curve of the discharge. And in a karst system, we usually see conduit flow, crack, kind of fracture flow, and then matrix flow. So the base flow is coming mostly from the matrix of the rock itself. And then kind of like a faster response is through the cracks. And then when you get those really fast rain responses and the really big push from the snowmelt discharge, that's generally conduit flow. Oh. Okay, thanks everyone.